Do you ever feel like you're constantly being interrupted, losing focus, and struggling to manage your time? Well, in today's episode, we're going to tackle these issues head on. My expert guest, Tobey Wyatt, shared invaluable insights and practical advice on everything from the doorway effect and decision fatigue to creating a judgment-free space for support, tools for task management, email organization, and the crucial role of accountability partners for business success. We delved into practical coping strategies like reducing choices and also the real impact of ADHD on many business owners, even those that don't actually realize they have it. And also how understanding your energy drains and sources can prevent burnout and just improve overall well-being. So if you're looking to boost efficiency, reclaim control of your workday, and have more time and energy to do what you love each day, then keep listening as we dive into these transformative approaches. So the question is this: how do entrepreneurs like us who don't have an endless supply of cash, how do we leverage the best apps, virtual assistants, automation tools, and systems to scale our businesses, increase our profits, and have more time to do what we love to do each day? That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answer. My name's Dr. Steve Day, and this is Systemize Your Success. Hey, and welcome to Systemize Your Success. I'm Dr. Steve Day, and today I'm joined by Tobey Wyatt. Tobey is a business operations expert. She's been the head of operations and the chief of staff in organizations, everything from tiny bootstrapped startups all the way up through non-profits to big global Fortune 50 companies and everything in between. She was also early this year diagnosed with ADHD, so I think we have a lot in common and a lot of fun stuff to talk about. She's a mum of 3 with 2 young kids, and she's been an entrepreneur who's been through a lot over her life. And all of that has allowed her to develop incredible skills that she now uses to help business owners and CEOs who are frustrated at the chaos in their organizations, their poor internal communications, and their lack of progress towards their goals. I'm excited about this, Tobey, because I think we are going to have a lot in common to talk about, especially with you being an operations system type person with the ADHD and the business owner or the business owner element to it as well. So let's get into it. Welcome, Tobey. Really nice to have you on the show.
Thank you so much, Steve. Glad to be here.
Cool. So we were just off camera, so to speak, before we got started. And so often with these conversations, we start talking about really interesting stuff just before we go, okay, let's hit record. And I think one of the key things I asked you was about the label of ADHD. Being
Mm,
newly diagnosed, it's pretty fresh in your mind
yeah,
about what that felt like to have that diagnosis. And I also wanted to just bring in early. This isn't an episode about ADHD, or in
no.
fact, that what we're going to talk about today is only for people with ADHD, and that's very far from it. But I think some of the points that you made, or we were just getting into making, were really interesting about the possible. They are statistics about the statistics around ADHD in business. So let's get into that. What does it mean to you? Why have you chosen, like I have, to talk openly about it? And how do you think that other business owners can benefit from you talking about it?
Yeah, so I could go on, I feel like, for days about this answer because it really is something that I'm very passionate about. A couple years ago, my daughter got diagnosed with ADHD. And I think there's a huge influx of adult people. So I'm in my 40s, and I think there's a huge amount of 40-year-old women and men, but especially women, who are finding that they resonate with the ADHD label much more than they previously understood. I've been through an education program. I've actually been trained to be a high school math teacher. And in doing so, we take some classwork on, childhood development and special education, which would include things like ADHD descriptions. And even with all of that training, my awareness and understanding of what ADHD meant really was basically the definition you might apply to like an 8-year-old boy, right? Like a kid who can't sit still. And so it was very hyper fixated on the H of ADHD. And it really never felt like it resonated with me whatsoever. And I was researching about my daughter because I didn't really see her behavior as completely resonating with ADHD. So in researching more to understand her diagnosis, I understood more about what came to be my diagnosis and realizing that I think we have mislabeled so much of ADHD as a capability or a capacity problem. Like if you have ADHD, you're not capable of, or you're going to have a really big problem with. And I think the problem with that is I've been a high performer my whole life. I got good grades. Um, I did well at all of my jobs. People praised me for my ability to do this and that. And the problem is that some of those things that I did and accomplished were incredibly expensive to my energy. They were I had to power through them so hard to get them done. That I think is a much better way of thinking about neurodivergence in general and ADHD is how much energy burn does it cost you versus costing other people to do X, Y, and Z. And so for different neurodivergences, those things are different. But the expense to your person for doing that. So yeah, it was really great to realize that because there's certain elements of my life that I just thought, why am I so dysfunctional at, creating a social circle or whatever? And it's because that additional planning element necessary to just plan to go out and socialize with people and meet new people and all of that was just too much. It was above the energy level that I had available to me. And so once finding that out, it was just very comforting to know that, like, okay, this is something we can think about and organize and systematize just like everything else.
Yeah, I love that. And I was just thinking as you were speaking something I learn about which may resonate with even a wider audience, and that is that simple things like being an introvert and extrovert, which people really understand and it's been around for decades, whereas things like ADHD have not, and especially in the adult circles. And I think that, myself, I used to think I was an extrovert. I
Mhm.
no longer do, but at the time I met my wife, I did.
Yeah.
And she is a very classic introvert. And I actually never really know what that meant. Like, is it about I like going
Hmm.
out? Well, actually, I like going out when I like go because I like to go and drinking. And does those two things correlate? Is it actually
Right.
going out, but you like and socializing, or is it the going drinking if when you're younger? And same with her, it's like she didn't really get what it meant, like what its strengths and weaknesses were. And I think one of the
Yeah.
things that really resonated when you said about the energy and
Yeah.
about so with extroverts and introverts I've now learned, and especially through work as a doctor as well over the years, is it's where do you get your energy from, and what you're saying is almost the other way, is like where do you expend more energy, and they're almost the same
Yeah.
thing, but obviously
Yeah.
opposite. And it's like if you're an introvert, you get your energy from being in very close knit relationships or conversations or on your own.
Hmm.
Whereas an
Yeah.
extrovert gets it from being around lots of random other people. And I think that the realization of that and then what you've just said then really makes sense to me.
Mhm.
And I think that
Yeah.
as business owners, the challenge is going back to your point before we go on, that you found like you were able, because you're a capable and intelligent woman, to be able to actually achieve. But it's the amount of
Hmm.
energy you have to expend to do those things. In education and in many jobs, because we're often shifted around, those sprints, if you like,
Yeah.
only are short-lived. Whereas one
Yes.
thing I've noticed in business, and where I've struggled a lot with like to keep that energy going, is that it's not short-lived. It's not like
Yeah.
you've got the small project then it's an end. It's like no, this goes on and on and on, and that's where becomes exhausting. So
Yeah.
yeah, I get you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think so much of life, we've miscorrelated things. I think people used to correlate shyness with extroversion versus introversion, obviously, shyness being an introverted thing. And I love that really more and more people are getting behind this sort of energy definition because I think that is a more accurate definition. I'm what I think is probably called an ambivert. I do like and I get energy from both spaces at different times. Um, and I think it's hugely important because if we don't monitor our energy reserve, that is what creates real problems. It's what creates health problems. It's what creates burnout. It just expands itself. And so once we become aware of it and we can make choices based on our energy expenditures or inputs, then the world becomes so much better.
Yeah, totally. Another thing you mentioned in the beginning was about systems as well, and about putting
Yeah,
systems in place to help. And I think that is, I mean, that's why I do what I do, really. And I think
yeah,
what I've realized over the years, and one thing I truly believe is that the biggest challenges we face on a consistent basis are often the source of our greatest superpowers later in life.
yes,
So how do
yes,
you feel that the realization of the things you found challenging over the years has made you or developed your superpowers? So maybe we start with what do you think
yeah.
your superpowers are and how have they come from the challenge you faced over the time?
Yeah, I think a lot of it does root back to my childhood. And, in my 40s now, I reflect like how far away that really is and how much life I've sort of lived since then. But I do think that you get a lot of deep roots, that like root into your brain when you're a child. And so my childhood was very chaotic. I moved 9 times before my 18th birthday, and these were like significant life-changing moves, losing all the friends and refiguring out life and all of that. And in doing so, I had to learn to read people really quickly because if I wanted friends, I had to make them very quickly. And I think everybody labeled me as an extrovert. But again, it was because I craved connection. And in order to receive that connection, I had to be sort of very charismatic in certain situations in order to sort of draw people into me because I was the new person to the situation. So, uh, anyway, I learned to read people very quickly. I learned how to deal with ambiguity, right? Because life was always changing in major ways. And I was like, well, I don't know where the places to go are. I don't know who the cool people are. I don't know anything. And so just getting comfortable and being like, it's okay that I don't know these things. And then resilience. I had a lot of difficulties in a lot of areas of my life, and I had to overcome them on a constant basis. And so that level of resilience has been tested, I think, over and over again in my life. And so those I typically think of as my superpowers. And so the way that that comes through now is I do a lot of CEO advisory work. And while it's based in operations, that's sort of the entry point. You're frustrated about the communication at your company. You're frustrated about the fact that you're always putting out fires instead of being proactive, the fact that you um, feel like you are always getting pulled into everything or things get dropped and you're not sure where, right? Those are operational problems that we can solve with operational solutions. But underneath it all, the way we react to all that is incredibly important. And I don't think there's nearly enough supports and systems in place for that. So, in reality, what I do with a lot of my clients is partner with them on the emotional load of doing the job that they do, of being a leader, of being a CEO, of being a startup founder, because we have decided that leadership means you can't talk to people about what you're afraid about. You can't talk to people about what you're not good about. And so it puts on this mask that anytime sort of it gets chipped away at because you make a mistake or something's going on, there's a really strong emotional reaction that actually doesn't match the stimulus involved, right? Like you get very frustrated and it's like, well, okay, somebody just typed in a wrong thing. Why are you so frustrated about this? And it's because we have isolated our leadership for so long. And it's a self done problem. Um, but that's the reading of people. That's the under like watching a situation that I don't understand and looking for what are the common threads here? What can I pick out? What do I understand? What do I recognize? And so the dealing with ambiguity. And then the resilience is just something that I think now as a business owner, it's like, okay, that's very helpful because it's a long slog and it doesn't end very quickly.
No, so thinking about what you just said there was triggering a few things off in my brain. I'm a micro business owner, so I currently have two full-time contractors that work with me remotely, and that's it. And so I don't have a leadership team. I don't have a managed, a C-suite to go and chew the cud with, so to speak. And
Yeah.
so this is a challenge that I face on a daily basis. Is this trying to appear to be in control and to know what to do, and but also trying to encourage my staff to take ownership.
Yeah.
I think one of the challenges is like getting frustrated and thankfully not losing my temper any, well, probably never, not say never, but very, 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 very rare. I don't remember the last time. Like, but these are the true things you've built up over time of being a micro business owner of like so I guess what am I trying to ask here? In these situations where you've got a micro business like myself and you don't have peers to actually talk about things, how do you recommend to your clients to actually deal when things do go wrong? Like, what is the approach that
Yeah.
like me would take with that sort of setup?
Yeah. I think the important thing is really making sure you create a safe, judgment-free, productive space. And so I talk about that a lot in like my website and some of the content that I put out. Because I think we believe we create those spaces much more often than we actually do. And so I can, in the work that I do, create that space together in partnership with my client. That's something that people just seem naturally drawn to be open with me and tell me things they wouldn't normally talk about with other people. And there's some sort of quality that I put off um, that sort of makes that easier for people. And I think a part of that, I think some of it just is the way I talk, the way I speak, the way I think about the world. And when they hear that, they just sort of let down some barriers. But I think another part of that is I work very hard at training myself to be non-judgmental. And what I mean by that is not that I don't have opinions about things or thoughts about whether this is good or bad. I have very strong thoughts and opinions on many things. But when I talk to a human being, I very much understand that human beings are incredibly complicated, and we are bringing a whole lifetime worth of experiences and situations. And we have current existences that are filled with stress and tension and all of these things. So, most bad behavior, most um, overreactions, um, and most responses that just don't feel good to other people are not driven from a place of, I want to be mean or I want to be hurtful or anything like that. These are actually people who want to do very well by their people, and they feel trapped either in the position that they have, they don't have an outlet, they don't have a safe, productive, judgment-free space. And so the three components of that I think are really important to be aware of. So a safe place, most leadership, the problem with a safe place is if, for example, you as a micro business owner talk to one of your two employees about something you're really frustrated about, or some worry that you have of the future, there may be repercussions for doing that, right? A lot of people used to talk to their administrative staff, their administrative support staff when, things were difficult. And it can feel gossipy, it can feel um, threatening. It can feel like, oh, if he's saying these things about, that person, what is he saying about me behind my back? And all of a sudden that starts brewing a culture that has impacts and waves beyond that. So the safe part of that needs to be that this isn't something that's going to have further repercussions. When I share something in this space, it stays in this space and it's okay to be shared in this space. It's not going to make the people around me less functional, less valuable. The judgment-free portion of it is to be talking with someone who is listening with very open ears. And that's not just to the person talking. So, what I mean by that is if I'm working with a CEO and they're telling me about how awful some staff member is that's on their team and how they never seem to get it, and, that's a vent. And they need the opportunity to do that vent. I need to be listening with the judgment free, not only to the CEO of it's totally fine for you to vent right now, and I don't judge you for it, but also to that employee. I'm not going to make a snap judgment based on something that you're frustrated about that encapsulates that human as a whole. So it needs to be judgment free about the situations we're talking about and the people directly involved. And then the productive space is actually one that I think gets missed a huge amount, which is people know how to vent, right? I'll go home and I'll tell my spouse, oh my gosh, blah, 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 right? And that person, that friend, that partner, that person involved in your personal life, they're invested in you, that mentor maybe, they're invested in you. And so when they respond, they're trying to make you feel better as the CEO, right? They don't really care about that employee. They realize, hey, you're upset, you're frustrated, you're struggling. And so they might give advice that's completely unproductive because they're just trying to make you feel better, right? And so they're not looking at the system as a whole. They're not looking at the team as a whole and going, okay, where you may be accountable for this and you don't want to hear the answer that I have to give you, but you need to hear it. And so I think those three components, most CEOs are missing that and they need to find a way to get it. And for some, that is a solution like me, and others need to find ways to band together. I think CEOs with other CEOs is a great place to start.
Brilliant answer. I love it. And obviously, I thought it would be because this is what you do. But yeah, no, fantastic. And I think there's so many incredibly useful and powerful things to take away from that. And one of them that I just have to mention is the idea of basically listening, especially when it's your spouse or a friend. And I think one thing that and I'm sure it's not just a male thing, going to be completely
No.
whatever, but I think the men are stereotyped as being the ones that try to fix all the problems.
Yeah,
When absolutely rather than just actually appreciating, no, this is just a vent. Allow
right.
it to happen. It will calm down, and that's it. It's over. And rather than going, oh yeah, I think we should do X, Y, and Z. And I think one of the on the flip side of that is like with staff, going back to your earlier point about um, not sharing too much with your staff. And I have definitely done this wrong in the past. I've definitely been too open and honest because I've had a good relationship with someone. They've been a brilliant worker. They've been a fairly, well, for me, my second in command, if you like. And then
Yeah,
that's almost like, oh, great, I've got someone to talk to now. But
yeah,
actually, that's not the way they see the relationship because you
right.
are still there, or I was still her boss, and and therefore there is still going to be that difference. And so that isn't the person you should be venting with for all the reasons you said. And yeah, it just made me
Yeah,
remember how I've done it so wrongly in the past, with all the best intentions, and but just it, never turned out well. So
yeah.
a good lesson there. Fantastic. So moving on, because I think there's other very interesting things to talk about. And so one of the things that I have struggled with in the early days massively, and one of the reasons that I am so passionate about systems and about being incredibly structured, and all the things that people love me for as a coach now, because this is what I help them do. What they don't realize is the reason I'm good at these is because I'm so bad at them. And the
Yes.
two things I have in mind, this goes back to my superpowers from your challenges. The two things I'm really thinking about, and I'm great to get your thoughts on this, but like basically task management and time
Mhm.
management. Because
Yes,
as small business owners, if you can nail those two things, you
yes,
then have headspace and time to deal with bigger problems and become a better leader, whatever. But we've got to get down to basics here. Like, how do you help people, or what do you suggest about people who do struggle with those key
yeah,
elements of constantly putting out fires, never ending task lists, and never enough time to do anything?
yeah. And I think I would start my answer in going just a step back. I don't think most people do believe they struggle with these things. I think we have oversimplified time management and task management to the point of they are completely unsexy, right? They are completely like nobody wants to go to some um conference that's like time management for 101 because everybody's like, I got successful people. Like I know how to do this stuff. And the thing is even highly successful people are usually very bad at both of them, right? And it's a natural thing. It's that we have way too much stimulus, and it goes back to that energy burn, right? Yes, you may have been able to do time management and task management by just throwing energy at the problem. And at some point, your energy reserves will run out. And for some people, that takes a whole lot longer than other people. And for those people who it takes a long time for, they just think like, no, I can power through anything. And at some point, some sort of life circumstance will come around that changes oftentimes that viewpoint. Um, so I think recognizing that there are actually ways to do task management and time management better, and that it is worth your time to invest in, um, people who talk about this stuff. I think I wonder if you resonate with this, but as a fellow business operations person, I think most people see business operations as either something they don't even know exists, right? Like, oh, people specialize in how we can communicate better as a team, how we can systematize our like, isn't that just life? Isn't that just figuring out how to do, your job? And no, there's actually people who specialize in this who want to put their stake in the ground of making systems and teams better. So one, knowing that it exists, and two, prioritizing it. It is something worth investing in, getting a chief of staff, getting an operations person, investing in a program like yours, and having that access. So with time and task management, I think um, what I have found to be very incredibly amusing and yet horrible at the same time, relating to what you say, is over the last 2 years now, I have had the chance to observe my own behaviors as a business owner. And I'm really good at what I do. I'm really good at finding the systems that work for people, how to communicate with people. And yet, if I look back at my own journey as a small business owner, I am my own worst client the vast majority of the time. So I think that's the key, though, is even people who know how to do this stuff really well, it's not the knowledge that actually solves the problem. It's the investing in the solutions that makes a difference. And it's very hard to do that when you are bombarded with priorities that are other, right? I have to land a new client. I have to put out content. I have to do all of these things. I have to do the client work and all of this back office work to create the systems that will actually make you much more effective and efficient doing all of those things never feels like a priority. So having someone else hold you to that, having someone else guide you and focus on that as their priority is incredibly powerful. So that's why I really believe in the position of chief of staff. Sometimes it's the head of operations role. Bringing in an advisor if you're not ready for an in-house person like that, it is well worth the time and budget necessary to do that because it's that accountability partner that is mostly what's needed. I like to say that sometimes I'm the genius of the mundane, which really just means nothing that I do, nothing that I implement is rocket science. You could figure it out. The question is, will you? So, yeah, do you have the right tools in place for task and time management? Are you holding yourself accountable to them? These are habits more than anything that have to be established and held firm.
Fantastic. Tell me what the doorway effect is before we move on, because I read this on your website, and I know this is linked. So tell me what the doorway
Yeah.
effect.
Yeah. So the doorway effect, it's a psychological principle. So I definitely didn't make it up. But the doorway effect, basically, this is if you think back into your life and the last time you sort of walked into a room, you forgot why you were there. Like, oh my gosh, I was just, what was I doing? And that is actually a psychological thing, right? It's not just like, oh, you have a bad memory or whatever. When you go through some sort of gateway, doorway, into a new space, your brain has an issue with the cache, CACHE, the cache of like, what was I doing? What was I processing? Because now I have a whole new set of stimulus to be processing. I just ejected that thing that you were supposed to be doing. So the doorway effect is that feeling. And I think it's really important that we know about it now because we have entirely new doorways in our life that never existed before. And so, one, we move around a whole lot more, right? We have cars and vehicles and and we move around. So we are moving into literally different physical spaces more often than our ancestors ever were, right? They were just more stationary. And so we have to understand the disruption that that causes. And then our phones are constantly a gateway and a doorway. So that, and I would even argue each app you go into on your phone is a new doorway and a gateway. So the amount of doorways and gateways we are going through on a constant basis is absolutely incredible. Anytime you're using your computer, right? And so we just have to understand the disruption that that has on our single processing brain. We love to think about multitasking, and more people are now well aware that it's task switching, and some people are really really good at very fast task switching, but a very tiny percentage of human beings are actually capable of multi-threading. And I wonder sometimes about the studies that have even been done that say a tiny percentage can, because I just wonder maybe some of those people are just savants at task switching, and it really does seem that way. um, but anyway, the doorway effect, I think, affects us all, and it can help us feel not so guilty or ashamed of like, oh yeah, like why can't I remember my keys when I went to the garage and I realized like I why don't I have the things I need? A lot of the times this is doorway.
Yeah, I've never heard that before. Obviously, I suffer incredibly badly from it, especially so with ADHD. But I'd never heard the expression before, and I
Yeah.
think one of the things just to roll on from that that I have be more conscious of doing it more actively in recent times, but have developed strategies to cope with this. And these are simple things. And I think as many people listening to this will be thinking this is just stuff you do. So, for example, you put your keys for your car in the bowl by the front door. You do
Yes.
that because you know where they are. Therefore, you don't have to go look for them. And
Yes.
so what we're doing there is we're actually eliminating the possibilities of where they could be, and therefore it makes it easier.
Yeah.
Then we take it one step further and we can eliminate choice for the same reasons. If you walk into your wardrobe and you're confronted with all these options of things you have to do, you're now creating
Yes.
distractions. And actually, what
Yeah.
happens with people with rapid brains is you may even, as I do, is I go into my drawer, I open the drawer and say, "Oh, I remember when I got that t-shirt. I went into the drawer to get a pair of socks. I'm now thinking about the time when I climbed a mountain and I got given a t-shirt at the end of it 14 years ago, which has no
Yeah.
relevance to my pair of socks." And so it's not just about the stimulus people see that were obvious ones, like going onto Facebook or social media, or
Right.
like opening a book or whatever. Like there can be really subtle things. And so
Yeah.
one of the things that I spent a huge amounts of unconscious and then conscious time doing is eliminating choice. It sounds really boring, but like
It is.
I have like 18 black t-shirts. Like I got one
Yeah.
under my shirt now. I just put the shirt on because I was doing a podcast interview. I only have two shirts. People that watch this regular will notice I had this shirt and another very similar looking shirt, and I don't wear any of
Right.
the shirts anymore. And it's like I have shirts when I go out. When I want to go out,
Hmm.
with my friends and my wife, when I want to go out to a
Right.
restaurant, I've got other stuff, but that isn't
Yeah.
part of my daily routine. I
Yeah.
eat the same lunch. I
Yeah.
eat the same breakfast. All of these things that like removal of choice. I don't have apps.
Hmm.
I don't go into social media. I get someone else to look at my emails for me. I get other people to do my task management and then hand me the priorities. Because if not, I am all over the place and distracted. And I think for someone with ADHD, it's just worse or more pronounced than the general
Yes.
public.
Yeah.
The general public all suffer from this. So adopt
Yes.
some of these things for everybody would be massively beneficial. And for some people, it's really beneficial. And I
Yeah.
think that's also a key to understand what all the stuff we're talking about is that wherever you happen to lie on whatever diagnosis we're talking about or spectrum or whatever, it's like some of
Yeah.
this stuff will be really helpful, some of it not so much, and some of it's a bit, some of it not so much. And then other things will be the opposite. And I think
Yeah.
you've just got to take from whatever conversations you hear about things and not think of it as a label or as a
Right.
diagnosis in some respects. It's like, will this thing that being talked about now, do I think that's actually relevant to me? Would it
Yeah.
be you speaking to someone like you to find out, well, you know, if I'm struggling with my communications in my business, well, it doesn't matter why. The
Yes.
the problem's there.
Correct.
So actually going
Yes.
and getting practical help about it and maybe uncovering something you didn't know about yourself in the process, whether or
Yeah.
not that happens is irrelevant. What you want is a solution and a plan to make it better.
Yeah. And Two quick responses to that is what you just encapsulated is another effect that I talk about a lot, which is called the curb cut effect.
I was going to
And the
come to
curb cut effect
that.
is in the US in the 60s, I think it was when they decided to cut the curbs at the corners so that they would create the ramp down to the street so that wheelchairs could exit a curb, go across the street and access the other curb, right? And so it was very much done for the purpose of those in wheelchairs. But the curb cut effect talks about how that change has impacted far more people in a very positive way than just those in wheelchairs. If we think of any parent with a stroller ever, right? The ability to go from a curb to the, street to the curb. And blind people were impacted by the ability to find that edge of the curb. And so to be able to walk down a ramp is much more um, safe and effective for them. And elderly people who are having a hard time making that step up to the curb benefit from the ramp. So the solutions that work for a marginalized group or a group that struggles with some sort of very specific things very often helps the mass population or a lot more people than the solution was necessarily intended for. So I think business owners should keep that in mind is solving problems for a particular employee who's struggling with things can seem like a waste of time. And I know in the US, there's been a whole lot of disbanding of the DEI programs, which, we don't need to get into
DEI,
all of the
sorry.
politics, diversity, equity, and inclusion. And so these are departments that were previously trying to focus on some of these solutions that would maybe target certain groups. And so certainly we don't need to get into the politics of that. But the sad thing is, I do believe that people see it as you're solving problems for a very specific person, and therefore you are expending more time and energy on someone and it's not benefiting the rest of us. And what we have found is that's just not usually the case. When we benefit one group, usually more people benefit than the group that was targeted. And the only other thing I would say to where you were going with like reducing choices and decision fatigue and all of that is I think there's some very notorious men that have, done that. So Steve Jobs talked about, he had basically, plug and play, grab the shirt, I grab the pants, and it's my uniform. I wear exactly the same thing every day. And I think a lot of women have felt like that's not a choice available to them because they are held to an appearance standard that feels higher than men. And so whether it's the styling of the hair and the makeup and the fashion choices that they feel like they need to make, I would argue that there are still ways to do it. The problem is there is cost to it. So either you can not choose to be invested in how you look to as high a degree. And I'm not talking about vanity. I am talking about, to feel like you have to sort of make fashion choices each and every day, right? So you can choose to less invest, and so you can have the plug and play thing of I pick blouse and I pick a pair of pants and they all match, right? I don't have anything that requires me to think, oh, this one requires brown pants and this one requires black pants and this one has to be worn. Get rid of all that. Pick one that's your favorite lane and have all of your choices be mix and matchable. So you never have to make a decision. The other choice that unfortunately is out there for a lot of women is a price tag, right? So you could put together in your closet fully formulated outfits with the jewelry, accessories, and everything already on the hanger, like already prepackaged together. The idea is with that, if you are soloing out things individually for outfits, then it usually is going to cost you more money. So just being aware that sometimes the women around you struggle with being able to limit their choices the same way that men have necessarily been able to limit their choices. I think we just need to highlight that sometimes so that women feel like they are at least seen and acknowledged, if not find ways to improve it for them as well.
Yeah, I can completely imagine that's a different, especially when I work for myself from home and the only people that ever see me, my own staff. I'm like, it's very easy for me to do these things, and so but I'm also very aware that's not practical for, and not just women, for people, for men
It's
who,
true.
but I think women have a much harder time when it comes to the image. I don't think there's any question about that. I do wonder if you had, I remember. this is a bit of a, but in The Simpsons, Marge Simpson, she had one outfit that she got. I don't
Yes.
know if you remember the episode, and she basically retailed it. But it was just that, like thinking that popped in my head when you were thinking, talking then, but not for the same reason, but it's almost like a bit like, okay, I have a black t-shirt that's super simple, like the average it costs
Hmm.
about £10 or whatever. That's not really going to be practical and possible when you go into an office and you're trying to, sit on the board, look professional, etc. And for yourself or for other women. But actually, maybe there is something actually saying, look, you could actually have a outfit which you particularly like and just buy more of the same.
Yes.
Or like you
Yes.
say, have, the mix and match options or whatever. But I think whatever it is, whatever the choice you're trying to eliminate, it's just be mindful on it of it and say, look,
Yes.
how can I make this simpler for me? Like what one thing we do is we buy packaged food, not packaged food, like a box of food. It's like the recipes come,
Yeah.
the vegetables come, and
Yeah.
you just basically
Yeah.
prep it and cook it, those sort of things. And we've done that for a
Love those.
long time now because it saves us probably like half an hour a night every single night.
Yes.
And that's half an hour with my
Yes.
kids. And it's
Yes.
like, so I either, yes, it costs a little bit more, but then we made the decision that we could afford that little bit extra to then have that extra time with our kids. Probably means we don't have to have a nanny, like all these little things that add up. And so it's just like sometimes, like you say, the knock-on effects of doing it for one reason may actually have benefits for other reasons. So
Yes.
yeah, it all comes back to a beautiful circle.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's the interesting element about context that I talk about is, CEOs, when we talk about them stereotypically, which is very unfortunate because I don't think it's the reality of many CEOs, but when we talk about CEOs stereotypically, they're doing reasonably well financially, right? The idea is that they've reached some level of success. And so financially, they have options available to them due to that level of success that aren't necessarily available to their staff. So when they get frustrated, why can't someone on my staff do X, Y, and Z? Recognizing that the context of that person's whole existence and whole life may be different enough that they can't make some of those choices, or they don't feel like they can make some of those choices, or they don't, um, there's different choices that are in the universe that surrounds those people. And so just having that recognition gives us that level of empathy to go, oh, these things that I've been able to solve for myself, maybe they haven't been able to do that.
Yeah.
And that's what I try to introduce with a lot of my CEOs. It then gets them to rethink the problem and go, oh, okay, I wasn't even thinking about that. And if I do, now I can get productive. I can think of solutions that might help that person.
Interesting. Very, very interesting, all of this. Cool. I'm going to draw it to a close very shortly, but I often ask my guests, like, what would you like to talk about? And one of the things that sparked my interest when I read through your list of things I talk about was about ambition not being.
Mm,
So before we draw it to close,
yeah,
and I ask you a
yeah,
few specific questions, my signature questions. I want
yeah.
to just touch on this because I think that it's a big topic, so we probably want to give it full justice in the few minutes we have. But I think that for me as an entrepreneur, as someone who believes I'm ambitious, but
Hmm.
also I come from a family. My parents were both GPs. They were house doctors, and there's not been a huge amount of overt like financial success within my
Mm,
immediate family or extended family. And so
yeah,
the idea of wanting that is is like you say, it's that dirty word. It's like why should I be striving to achieve, an exponential wealth or whatever? Like I'm not actually saying I am or I ain't in this conversation, but a lot of people are um as CEOs, as business owners or whatever, that's what drives us. And whether it becomes to fruition or not, I think has a lot to do with the fact if we truly believe we're worthy of that, or actually it's something that our peers will accept, and our not just our peers, our family, etc. And we can hold ourselves back. That's my thoughts on it.
yeah.
And I wanted to hear what your thoughts were.
Yeah, and I'm the same way. I had a pastor as my dad. I had an RN as my mom. These are not jobs in which you are striving to, be on the Forbes 500 list or, Forbes 50 list or whatever, or achieve massive wealth, right? And so when you have a situation where you go against the grain of your family, I think that this ambition triggers, this imposter syndrome with both men and women. This is not a women thing. It's like, what? Why me? Why should I be saying things like this? Why is it okay for me? And it can create a lot of internal shame. And it doesn't actually a lot of times have to do with the environment that the CEO finds themselves in, or any ambitious person finds themselves in. This is oftentimes a self-imposed shame, right? And so it can be contributed by releasing nuggets of talking about your ambition to the people around you and getting negative response and feedback back, right? Of thinking, oh, yep, I shared something I'm ambitious about, and people thought that I was being greedy or that I was being too aggressive. And I think there's a really important distinction in of ambition in and of itself has revolutionized our world. There's so much goodness in ambition, and it has improved the lives of so many people. The fact that people in our history were ambitious and did some of the things they did. And there have been highly ambitious people in our history that have been incredibly destructive, right? But it's not the ambition in and of itself that was the destructive force. There's two things about ambition that can be destructive. One is what you're ambitious about, right? So if we think of, World War II, somebody who's ambitious about eliminating a group of people, really awful, right? That creates high levels of destruction around them. But um, so that ambition, because the aim of the ambition was something very destructive, that ambition was very destructive. The other thing that I think is much more common to normal people is the way you go about achieving ambition can be destructive. So when you brute force through something and you just go, I am so myopically focused on the thing I am ambitious of that I am disregarding the impact I have to the people around me in order to achieve it, that's what's destructive, not the fact that you were ambitious in the first place. And I think just like shyness and introversion, if we circle back all the way to the beginning of our conversation, it's something we have falsely correlated, right? We believe that the ambition is actually what talks about the destructive behavior. And it's not the ambition, it's the choice that we make of how we pursue that ambition. So I'm very much about supporting and feeding the ambition of the clients I work with and tempering and taming and watching for the destructive behaviors that they could develop in the effort to achieve that ambition.
Yeah. Listening to you then, I can resonate with a lot of what you said. And I definitely, when I started this business, my after leaving medicine and going back into business, and for various factors around as there always are, but I became very myopically focused onto success and with a very short timeline, which was not realistic in, unless you happen to strike gold with a unicorn business. But actually, what changed for me was the realization that I was actually, in effect, just from neglect, not from activity, but actually from neglect, being super hyper focused and neglecting those around me and therefore causing harm to my immediate family and friends. But also just going, okay, well, who's put this timeline in place? Who's decided that it has to be by this year, this decade, whatever? My ambition hasn't changed. I've just been accepted the fact I now have a family. And, we now got two young kids to think about and look after and a very ambitious wife. And if we both want to have our ambition and be supporting of each other doing that and bring up kids that know who we are, then we've got to actually be maybe just change or move the goalpost slightly. And maybe it's just moving them
Yeah.
slightly further away or
Yep.
slightly, down. It doesn't matter. But the point is that the ambition for me hasn't changed, but actually the path I've chosen to get there has.
Yeah.
So I really resonate with that because it was some hard life lessons that got me to realize that. So
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
And it's taking in that new stimulus and making and allowing yourself to make new decisions based on the new stimulus. So
Yeah,
when you create a family, realizing that that creates a whole bunch of new stimulus, and you just got to make some adjustments, some
exactly.
tweaks.
Back to our doorway effect. Lots of other distractions going on
This
now.
is true.
Oh, fabulous. This has been a wonderful, wonderful chat. I was excited when I saw you coming on, and you haven't disappointed at all. I've really enjoyed this. Before I go, or before you go, I do want to ask you a couple of signature questions, very easy questions, just a bit of fun. What are a couple of your favorite apps or browser plugins or things that tools
Mhm.
that you use to make your life better?
Yeah. So the number one tool that has impacted my life is Arc browser. So I'm a big fan. I didn't even think of a browser as something I needed to have a tool for. And my husband was going through multiple browsers. It's like, why are you even picking, what's the value in this? And especially, I'm a person who has multiple areas of my world. So I think many of us have a work business or a workspace and a personal space. So as soon as you create that, but most of our browsers, all the windows pile together, right? They're just a bunch of tabs in one thing. And you could create, okay, here's the window I search for stuff in this browser, and here's the window I search for the stuff in this browser, so and I separate it that way. But Arc browser does that for you and you never lose your place. So if I close a window, I am not panicking because everything that I have, because so much of our world now is browser based. So much of our applications are web based. So the Arc browser allows me to label and folder and save. And you create different spaces. And so when I'm searching for something personal, that I go to my personal space and then I search from there and then it's saved. So whenever I'm like, oh, I was looking for that Halloween costume for my kid. Where was that? Oh, it's right here. And so I know where to find anything. So that was probably the most life-changing tool that I've found in recent history. So I definitely advise that. I love ClickUp. It's a big favorite of mine. I think it can be a very difficult tool to implement because it has a high level of potential complexity, but people need to bring it down to its most simplistic nature for initial implementation. But I do love that it has the ability to have the note taking and the task management all in one. So you get your single source of truth. That's another thing I talk about a lot, a single source of truth
Yeah.
that has much of your, life's blood of your organization in it. So those are probably the two main tools that I think about um, implementing very quickly with someone. The other one I would just quickly touch on that I use, I'm not sure it's the best tool out there, but SaneBox is an email tool that allows me to I used to be a big fan of rules. So as soon as like in Outlook, they were called rules and it would sort things into folders. The rules broke so easily. And SaneBox is just a tool that uses a little bit more automation to do that. So all of my stuff is already in the folder it belongs in. So I can decide whether I want to see an email about a certain topic based on whether I open that. So it does create a bit of a problem because now I have like 10 folders that might have new emails popping up in it all the time. But I can choose which ones I go and look at any given moment.
Yeah, I had play with the same box a few years ago.
Mhm.
We have a different method that I use now, but I did
Yeah.
think it was quite interesting. But I've never heard of Arc. I'm going to check that out. I really like that idea. There are something going towards that in Google. I use Google Chrome with groups and things, but it's not as effective as it
Yeah.
needs to be. And I think that sounds awesome. Cool, thank you. Who else would you think would be a fabulous guest for this podcast?
So I mean, you're very operationally minded. So one of the people that comes to mind immediately is someone that I've been talking to since the beginning of my journey, Jennifer Yates. She is a rebel and a rock star. She is just such a great character. She comes from New Orleans and she brings this really fabulous artistic energy to operations. And so she just brings such a fabulous flair to this boring world that we so often think of as operations.
Fantastic. If you wouldn't mind introing me, she sounds awesome. Cool.
Yeah.
And very, very lastly, the podcast name is Systemize Your Success, but what does success mean to you and why?
So Success to me means that my world is able to function at a place where happiness is possible. And so that's very like, what the heck did I just say? But it requires balance. It requires enough money coming in the door that allows me to fund the certain things that sort of makes life turn easier, and so I can buy those food boxes and do the meal kits because it is a much better way to go about things. So I'm making enough money, but I have enough time and energy balance. And so that is always the tug and pull with most businesses is once you start achieving financial success, do you have the energy and the balanced success at the same time? And so if you create the right systems and processes and team around you, um, it is possible, but it requires you to make certain choices. And those choices are often way harder to make than they sound like they should be. Letting go of something, delegating something that feels very, particular. So being able to have time with my kids, being able to build friendships and relationships, which I talked about, I'm very horrible at doing, and having the freedom that comes with my own business be able to do all of those things. That would be my current definition of success at the very least.
Wonderful. Brilliant answer. Tobey, if people want to find out more about you or are interested in learning how you can help them, where can they come and find you?
Sure. So you could go to my website. You could book a free session there. My website is www.motherlode.biz. So MOTHERLODE.biz, B-I-Z. I also have a fairly unique name. Tobey Wyatt is pretty easily searchable on LinkedIn. So feel free to go TOBEYWYATT. That's the great thing of having a unique name is it's pretty easy to find me.
Yeah, I did actually Google you before, and I think the first two pages are you. So that's pretty impressive.
I don't have to pay for
Either
it.
you've got an incredible SEO agent working for you, or it's just the fact you've got a cool name. So that's pretty cool. All right, Tobey, it's been an absolute pleasure. I've really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for your time today.
Awesome. Thank you so much for a great conversation, Steve.